They called him an outlaw, but the only law he ever broke was falling in love with the wrong woman. The wind drifted slowly through the streets of Silver Creek, carrying dust as fine as flour across the sun-bleached boardwalks, where boots had worn grooves into the wood and secrets lingered like heat above the desert floor. It was the kind of town that measured justice in whispers and loyalty in glances, a place where every badge gleamed brighter than mercy and every rumor traveled faster than a galloping horse. At the heart of it stood the sheriff's office, its weathered sign creaking softly beneath the weight of a relentless noon sun, and behind its iron-starred doors lived Eleanor Whitfield, the sheriff's only daughter, a woman raised on scripture, duty, and the unyielding belief that right was as clear as the desert sky. She moved through town like a hymn carried on a Sunday breeze, graceful, composed, and admired by all who tipped their hats in her presence. Her pale blue dress swaying gently with each step, her gloved hands folded neatly, as if the world itself were something fragile she had been taught to protect. Yet beyond the safety of polished brass and courthouse walls lay a horizon painted in danger, where lawmen rarely rode alone and justice was as elusive as rain in August. 20 miles beyond town, near a canyon carved by centuries of wind and silence, a lone rider guided his chestnut horse along a narrow trail, his silhouette cutting against the blazing sky like a shadow that refused to disappear. His name was Cole Bennett, a man whispered about in saloons and spoken of in hushed tones at supper tables, branded a rebel by men who had never cared to learn the truth behind his quiet eyes. Dust clung to his boots, and the brim of his hat cast a cool shadow across a face shaped by hardship and restraint, not cruelty. Those who knew nothing called him dangerous. Those who knew enough called him honorable. He carried no malice, only memories, and a heart that refused to bow to injustice, even when it meant standing alone beneath an endless western sky. Fate, as relentless as the desert sun, began to weave its silent thread on a late summer afternoon when Eleanor's carriage wheel splintered along a lonely stretch of road, miles from town and farther still from the certainty she had always known. The prairie stretched wide and empty, the golden grass whispering in the breeze as clouds drifted lazily across a sky too vast to offer comfort. Her driver worked anxiously beside the broken wheel, his hands trembling beneath the heat, while Eleanor stood nearby, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon where a solitary figure approached through a haze of drifting dust. The rhythmic echo of hooves grew clearer with each passing second, steady and unhurried, like the ticking of a clock marking the moment her life would change forever. When the rider finally emerged, the sunlight glinted softly along the silver buckle at his waist, and his presence seemed to quiet the restless wind itself. Cole Bennett reined in his horse 10 paces away, his posture calm, his voice low and respectful as he tipped his hat. For a fleeting moment, time itself appeared to hesitate, suspended between law and legend, between expectation and truth. Eleanor's breath caught as their eyes met, hers clear and searching, his steady and unafraid. And in that silent exchange, something ancient and undeniable stirred, as inevitable as dawn over the frontier. She had been taught that men like him were trouble, rebels who defied the law and threatened the fragile order her father defended. Yet standing before her was not the villain of whispered tales, but a man whose quiet dignity spoke louder than accusation. And as the wind carried the scent of sun-warmed sage across the open plains, neither of them knew that this chance meeting beneath an endless American sky would ignite a love destined to challenge the very meaning of justice, forever blurring the line between duty and the truth of the human heart. By the time the carriage wheel was secured and the dust settled back onto the quiet prairie, the silence between Eleanor Whitfield and Cole Bennett carried more weight than any words they could have spoken. He worked with steady hands, tightening the iron bolts beneath the wagon as the sun drifted westward, casting long golden shadows across the grasslands that stretched for miles in every direction. The scent of warm sage rode on the breeze, mingling with the faint creak of leather and the rhythmic rustle of wind through the dry plains. Eleanor watched him from beneath the brim of her bonnet, her gloved hands clasped neatly before her, studying the quiet confidence in his movements, the deliberate care he took with each turn of the wrench. This was not the recklessness she had been warned about since childhood, nor the danger whispered about by townsfolk gathered on Sunday afternoons. This was something steadier, something quieter, something that unsettled her in ways she could not yet name. Silver Creek had raised her to believe in order, in clear lines drawn between right and wrong, and in the unshakable authority of the law her father upheld with unwavering conviction. Yet standing beneath the wide American sky, she felt those lines soften like chalk beneath rain. Cole rose slowly once the repair was complete, brushing dust from his hands, his hat tipped slightly forward in a gesture of quiet respect. His voice, low and even, carried the calm of a man accustomed to long roads and longer silences as he assured her that the carriage would carry her safely back to town. Eleanor thanked him with measured grace, her words polite yet sincere, but as their eyes met once more, something unspoken lingered between them, fragile as morning frost and just as fleeting. The driver climbed back onto the seat, reins in hand, and the horses shifted impatiently, their hooves stirring small clouds of dust that glowed in the amber light of late afternoon. As the carriage began to roll forward, Eleanor turned for one final glance, her heart tightening with a curiosity she could neither justify nor dismiss. Cole remained where he stood, a solitary figure against the vast horizon, his silhouette framed by the endless sky, watching in silence as the distance between them slowly grew. 20 miles later, the familiar outline of Silver Creek emerged from the haze, its church steeple rising above the clustered rooftops, the sheriff's star gleaming faintly in the fading sunlight. Lanterns flickered to life along the main street as townsfolk gathered for the evening, their voices blending into the comforting murmur of routine. Yet when Eleanor stepped down from the carriage and crossed the threshold of her father's office, the warmth of home felt strangely unfamiliar. Sheriff Thomas Whitfield looked up from his desk, his weathered face softening at the sight of his daughter, though concern quickly replaced his smile as he noticed the dust upon her hem. She assured him she was safe, recounting the broken wheel and the stranger who had offered assistance, careful with her words, deliberate in her restraint. But when she spoke his name, a shadow crossed her father's expression like a passing storm over open land. The sheriff's jaw tightened, and the room seemed to grow colder as he spoke of Cole Bennett not as a man, but as a warning, a rebel who defied authority and challenged the fragile peace of the territory. His voice carried the weight of law and experience, each word shaped by years of duty and sacrifice. Eleanor listened in silence, her heart divided between loyalty and an unfamiliar sense of doubt, recalling the quiet dignity she had witnessed beneath the prairie sun. Later that evening, as twilight settled over Silver Creek and the last embers of daylight faded into a sky dusted with stars, she stood by her bedroom window overlooking the sleeping town. The distant sound of a lone harmonica drifted through the night air, soft and haunting, carried by the wind across miles of open land. She could not know whether it was real or merely a memory carried on the breeze, but it stirred something deep within her, something gentle and unyielding. In that moment, beneath the vast American sky, Eleanor Whitfield realized that the world she had always known was larger, more complicated, and far more human than the laws written on courthouse walls. And somewhere beyond the lantern-lit streets of Silver Creek rode a man whose quiet honor had already begun to change the course of her destiny. Morning arrived over Silver Creek in a wash of pale gold, the rising sun stretching across the rooftops and casting long beams of light through drifting dust that shimmered like fine powder in the crisp desert air. Storefront shutters creaked open one by one, and the scent of fresh coffee mingled with the earthy aroma of leather and hay as townsfolk began their day along the weathered boardwalks. Horses stamped softly beside hitching posts, their breath visible in the cool air, while a distant church bell tolled, slow and steady, echoing across the valley like a promise carved in time. Inside the sheriff's office, Eleanor Whitfield sat quietly at a polished oak desk, sorting neatly stacked documents with careful hands, her posture composed yet her thoughts far from the orderly lines of ink before her. The lamplight had long since faded, replaced by the clear glow of morning, but the memory of the previous afternoon lingered like a whisper she could not silence. She recalled the steady calm in Cole Bennett's voice, the quiet strength in his gaze, and the unspoken dignity that defied the rumors repeated throughout Silver Creek. Beyond the office window, the American flag stirred gently in the breeze, its colors bright against the endless blue sky, a symbol of law and certainty that had guided her entire life. Yet for the first time, she found herself wondering whether justice was always as simple as it appeared beneath its proud banner. Sheriff Thomas Whitfield entered with measured steps, the polished star on his chest catching the morning light, his expression firm yet lined with concern born from years of duty. He spoke briefly of routine matters, his voice calm but resolute, reminding Eleanor of the fragile peace that rested upon his shoulders. Though he did not mention Cole Bennett again, the silence carried meaning enough, and Eleanor sensed the invisible boundary drawn between her father's authority and her growing uncertainty. Outside, the town moved with steady purpose, wagons rattling over packed earth roads as merchants arranged their goods, and children chased laughter beneath the watchful eyes of their elders. Yet even amid such ordinary rhythm, whispers traveled like wind through dry grass. At the general store, men gathered near barrels of flour and sacks of grain, speaking in low voices about a lone rider seen beyond the canyon, a man who refused to bow to authority and whose presence unsettled the careful order of their world. Some spoke his name with suspicion, others with reluctant respect, but all agreed that Cole Bennett was a man who lived by his own code. Miles beyond Silver Creek, where the land rolled into open prairie and the horizon stretched unbroken for 50 miles, Cole guided his horse along a winding trail edged with sagebrush and sun-bleached stone. The rhythm of hooves against the hard earth echoed softly beneath the vast sky, accompanied by the mournful cry of a distant hawk circling high above. He rode with unhurried purpose, the morning breeze tugging gently at his coat as sunlight traced the lines of a face shaped by endurance rather than defiance. In his saddlebag rested a worn leather journal and a folded letter sealed with care, tokens of a past that bound him to a promise few would ever understand. He paused atop a low ridge overlooking the valley, where Silver Creek shimmered faintly in the distance, its rooftops glowing like scattered embers beneath the sun. For a moment, he allowed himself the stillness of reflection, recalling the quiet grace of Eleanor Whitfield and the clarity in her eyes, so unlike the suspicion he had learned to expect. He knew the gulf between their worlds was wider than any desert, carved by law, loyalty, and expectation, yet her memory lingered like the distant sound of a harmonica carried on the wind. As he tipped his hat against the rising light and turned his horse toward the open frontier, neither he nor Eleanor could know that the paths of duty and destiny were already drawing them closer together, guided not by rebellion or decree, but by a truth that would test the boundaries of honor, challenge the meaning of justice, and reveal that sometimes the quietest hearts possess the greatest courage beneath the endless American sky. The following afternoon, Silver Creek shimmered beneath a relentless sun, the air warm and dry as heat rippled above the dusty streets like a mirage. Wagons rolled lazily past storefronts, their wooden wheels creaking against the packed earth, while the scent of tobacco and sun-cured leather drifted from the open doors of the saloon. The town moved with familiar rhythm, yet beneath its calm exterior stirred an undercurrent of expectation, as though the wind itself carried whispers of something unseen. Eleanor Whitfield stepped lightly along the boardwalk, her pale blue dress brushing softly against polished planks worn smooth by decades of passing boots. Her gloved hands held a small parcel of documents for the courthouse, but her thoughts wandered far beyond the neat order of ink and paper. Each step felt measured, each breath deliberate, as she sensed the quiet weight of unseen eyes and unspoken judgments lingering in the afternoon light. At the far end of the street, Sheriff Thomas Whitfield stood beside the hitching rail outside his office, his star gleaming against his vest, a silent emblem of authority beneath the vast American sky. His presence commanded respect without a word, and townsfolk tipped their hats as they passed, their gestures filled with trust born of years under his watchful care. Yet today, his gaze remained fixed on the horizon beyond the town limits, where the distant line of desert met the endless blue. A rancher approached with hurried steps, speaking in hushed tones, and though Eleanor could not hear the words, she saw the change in her father's expression, the tightening of his jaw, the shadow of concern crossing his weathered face. A name had been spoken, and it carried the weight of rumor and unease. Word spread quickly through Silver Creek, drifting from the general store to the blacksmith's forge, from the barber's chair to the church steps, carried by voices lowered in caution. Some spoke of Cole Bennett with suspicion, branding him a rebel who challenged authority and lived beyond the reach of law. Others, more reluctant, admitted that no honest charge had ever been proven against him, and that his defiance was rooted not in malice but in conviction. Still, fear thrived where certainty faltered, and the townspeople clung to the comfort of clear divisions between order and chaos. Eleanor paused near the courthouse steps, her gaze drawn instinctively toward the open plains beyond the last row of buildings. The wind stirred her bonnet ribbons as if urging her to listen, and she felt again the echo of a steady voice beneath the wide prairie sky. She remembered the calm in his eyes, the quiet respect in his words, and the sense that he had nothing to hide. Yet she also knew the expectations placed upon her, the unspoken promise that she would stand beside her father and uphold the law that defined their lives. The conflict settled softly in her heart, like dust upon a windowsill, subtle yet impossible to ignore. Miles away, atop a low ridge overlooking the valley, Cole Bennett guided his horse to a halt. The town of Silver Creek lay before him, barely 5 miles in the distance, its rooftops glinting beneath the afternoon sun. He studied it in silence, the wind tugging gently at his coat as a meadowlark's song drifted across the open land. In his hand rested a folded letter sealed with careful precision, its edges worn from travel, its contents known only to him. He had not come to defy the law, nor to challenge its keeper, but to honor a promise made long ago, one that bound him to the truth regardless of consequence. Yet he knew that truth alone could not silence suspicion, nor bridge the divide between a sheriff's world and his own. As the sun dipped westward, casting amber light across the prairie, Cole tipped his hat and turned his horse toward the fading trail, choosing patience over haste. Back in Silver Creek, Eleanor stood beside the courthouse window, watching the horizon glow with the soft fire of dusk. She sensed, though she could not explain how, that destiny was moving quietly toward her, carried on the same wind that rustled the prairie grass beyond the town. In that golden stillness, between duty and longing, the lines of fate drew tighter, and the distance between law and love began, slowly and inevitably, to close. The next morning unfolded beneath a sky brushed with pale amber, as dawn stretched gently across Silver Creek and bathed the town in a soft, forgiving light. A cool breeze drifted along the dusty streets, carrying the scent of fresh coffee and sun-warmed timber through the quiet air, while the first rays of sunlight kissed the church steeple and gilded the sheriff's star with a subdued glow. Eleanor Whitfield stood at the edge of the boardwalk, her gloved hands clasped lightly before her as she watched the town awaken, each passing moment marked by the distant clatter of wagon wheels and the soft murmur of voices greeting the day. Though her posture remained composed, her thoughts wandered beyond the courthouse walls, drawn once more toward the endless horizon where memory lingered like the echo of a forgotten melody. The prairie stretched wide and silent beyond the last row of buildings, its golden grasses swaying gently beneath the morning wind, and in that quiet expanse, something within her stirred with a sense of anticipation she could neither explain nor deny. Sheriff Thomas Whitfield emerged from his office with measured steps, his presence commanding as ever, the polished badge upon his chest reflecting the sunlight with unwavering certainty. His voice was calm as he greeted the townsfolk, yet beneath its steadiness lay the weight of responsibility, a reminder that law and order were the pillars upon which Silver Creek stood. As he passed Eleanor, his gaze softened, though concern lingered in his eyes, a silent acknowledgement of the unspoken tension that had settled between duty and curiosity. He spoke of routine patrols and neighboring settlements, but when the name of Cole Bennett surfaced once more in quiet conversation among the townspeople, the sheriff's expression grew resolute, his loyalty to the law unshaken. Eleanor listened without protest, though the memory of a lone rider beneath an endless sky refused to fade. By mid-morning, the town bustled with life. Children darted along the boardwalk, merchants arranged their wares beneath striped awnings, and the blacksmith's hammer rang with rhythmic certainty against glowing steel. Yet beneath the hum of daily routine lingered a quiet expectancy, as if the wind itself carried news from beyond the canyon. 5 miles outside Silver Creek, along a trail lined with sagebrush and sun-bleached stones, Cole Bennett guided his horse at an unhurried pace toward the town's outskirts. The sun rose higher with each passing mile, casting long shadows across the rolling plains and illuminating the worn leather of his saddle. In his saddlebag rested a carefully folded letter sealed with wax, its contents preserved through miles of dust and time. It was not rebellion that brought him closer to Silver Creek, but truth, carried with the weight of a promise he had sworn to keep. He paused upon a low ridge overlooking the valley, where the rooftops of the town shimmered beneath the morning light. From that distance, Silver Creek appeared peaceful, its quiet charm untouched by suspicion, yet he knew the reality that awaited him within its borders. Rumor had already traveled ahead of him, and the sheriff's authority cast a long shadow across its streets. Still, he did not turn away. With a steady breath, he tipped his hat against the rising sun and guided his horse forward, each hoofbeat echoing with quiet resolve. Back in town, Eleanor lingered near the courthouse steps as a gentle wind lifted the ribbons of her bonnet. Without knowing why, she felt compelled to look toward the distant horizon. There, against the shimmering veil of heat rising from the plains, a solitary figure emerged, framed by sunlight and dust. The rhythmic sound of hooves reached her ears moments later, soft yet unmistakable, and her heart stirred with a quiet recognition that needed no explanation. As the rider approached within 100 yards of Silver Creek, the townspeople began to take notice, their conversations faltering into cautious whispers. Some watched with suspicion, others with curiosity, but none could deny the calm dignity in his bearing. Eleanor remained still, her breath caught between expectation and uncertainty, as destiny drew closer with every measured step. In that suspended moment beneath the vast American sky, the distance between law and longing narrowed to a single horizon, and the quiet promise of truth rode steadily towards Silver Creek, guided not by defiance, but by honor, courage, and the unyielding pull of fate. The murmur of Silver Creek faded into an uneasy hush as the lone rider crossed the final stretch of open prairie, his horse's steady hooves echoing softly against the packed earth of the town's entrance. Dust swirled in golden spirals around him, illuminated by the late morning sun that hung high above the endless sky. Shopkeepers paused in their work, and conversations drifted into silence as curious eyes followed his approach. The wind carried the scent of dry sage and leather through the streets, brushing against the wooden facades of buildings that had stood for decades as symbols of order and certainty. Cole Bennett rode without haste, his posture calm and composed, his gaze level and unwavering beneath the brim of his hat. There was no challenge in his presence, only quiet resolve, as though he carried a purpose greater than rumor or fear. Eleanor Whitfield stood near the courthouse steps, her heart stirring with recognition before her mind could reason against it. The rhythmic sound of hooves drew closer, each step narrowing the distance between expectation and reality. When Cole reined in his horse just beyond the hitching rail, he dismounted with measured grace, removing his hat in a gesture of respect that caught the sunlight along its worn brim. For a fleeting moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Their eyes met across the dusty street, hers filled with quiet curiosity, his steady with unspoken sincerity, and in that silent exchange lay a truth neither dared to voice. Sheriff Thomas Whitfield emerged from his office, his polished badge glinting sharply in the sun as authority stepped forward to meet uncertainty. His boots struck the boardwalk with deliberate weight, and the faint creak of leather echoed like a warning carried on the wind. He regarded Cole with a firm, unreadable expression, the calm of a seasoned lawman masking the tension beneath. The townspeople watched from doorways and windows, their silence thick with anticipation as law and defiance faced one another beneath the boundless sky. Cole inclined his head respectfully, his voice low, and even as he explained that he had come not to disrupt the peace, but to deliver a letter of importance, one bearing the seal of a respected federal magistrate from San Antonio, nearly 300 miles away. The sheriff accepted the folded document with cautious restraint, his eyes narrowing as he examined the wax seal, its impression unmistakable in the harsh light of day. A ripple of surprise passed through the onlookers, though none dared to speak. Eleanor felt her breath catch as her father read the contents, the silence stretching like a taut thread between them. Though his expression remained composed, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his features, as if the words within challenged a certainty long held. Cole stood patiently, neither defensive nor proud, his quiet dignity speaking louder than any proclamation. When the sheriff finally lowered the letter, he met Cole's gaze with measured gravity, acknowledging the authority behind the seal without surrendering his own. The tension eased, though it did not vanish, lingering like heat after a passing storm. With a brief nod, the sheriff returned the letter and reminded him that Silver Creek remained under the protection of its laws. Cole accepted the words without protest, his expression calm, his respect unwavering. As he turned toward the hitching rail, Eleanor found herself stepping forward, compelled by a force she could neither name nor resist. Their eyes met once more, and though no words passed between them, a silent understanding flickered like sunlight upon water. In that moment, beneath the vast American sky, the boundary between suspicion and truth began to shift, and the distance between two opposing worlds narrowed with the quiet promise of something yet to unfold. The wind stirred gently through the town, carrying with it the distant cry of a meadowlark and the faint rustle of prairie grass. As Silver Creek exhaled and returned to its rhythm, unaware that destiny had just stepped onto its dusty streets, guided not by defiance, but by honor, courage, and the enduring pull of the human heart. By late afternoon, the golden light of the western sun settled gently over Silver Creek, painting the town in warm hues of amber and bronze as shadows stretched long across the dusty streets. The air carried the soft murmur of daily life, the distant creak of wagon wheels mingling with the rhythmic clang of the blacksmith's hammer and the faint melody of a piano drifting from the open doors of the saloon. Yet beneath, the familiar cadence lingered a quiet tension, as if the very wind sensed that something had shifted within the heart of the town. Cole Bennett stood beside the hitching rail outside the general store, his horse calmly grazing on a patch of dry grass, while he adjusted the strap of his saddle with unhurried precision. His presence, though composed and respectful, continued to draw watchful glances from townsfolk who passed with measured steps, their curiosity tempered by caution. Some offered polite nods, others turned away in silence, uncertain whether to regard him as a stranger or a threat. He neither sought attention nor avoided it, carrying himself with the steady assurance of a man accustomed to standing alone beneath open skies. Inside the general store, Eleanor Whitfield selected a small parcel of supplies, her movements graceful yet deliberate as she listened to the hushed conversations around her. Whispers followed her like drifting dust, fragments of rumor and speculation that spoke of the lone rider who had entered Silver Creek with a letter sealed by distant authority. Though she kept her gaze lowered, she could not escape the quiet stir within her heart, a sense of curiosity that lingered like the fading echo of a distant hymn. When she stepped outside into the gentle glow of the afternoon sun, the warmth of the light met the cool brush of the breeze, carrying with it the scent of sage and leather. There, only a few paces away, stood Cole Bennett. For a moment, time itself seemed to pause. The noise of the street softened into a distant hum as their eyes met once more, hers luminous with quiet wonder, his steady with respectful restraint. He removed his hat in greeting, his voice calm and sincere as he offered a simple acknowledgement of her presence. Eleanor inclined her head in return, her words measured yet warm, thanking him once again for his assistance upon the prairie. Their exchange was brief, courteous, and unadorned, yet within it lay an unspoken understanding that transcended the boundaries of law and reputation. The sunlight glinted softly against the polished brass buttons of her gloves, while a faint breeze lifted a strand of her hair, catching the golden glow of the late afternoon. Cole spoke gently, explaining that he would remain in town only long enough to ensure that the contents of the magistrate's letter were properly acknowledged. His tone held neither defiance nor apology, only quiet certainty, as though truth itself were his only companion. Eleanor listened, sensing the sincerity behind his words, and for the first time she allowed herself to see him not as rumor had painted him, but as the man he truly was. From the far end of the street, Sheriff Thomas Whitfield observed the encounter with measured vigilance. He stood beside the doorway of his office, his expression unreadable, yet his eyes reflected the weight of a father's concern as well as the authority of the law he had sworn to uphold. He saw the respectful distance between them, the absence of impropriety, and though he said nothing, the tightening of his jaw spoke volumes. He understood that duty demanded caution, yet he could not ignore the quiet dignity he had witnessed in Cole Bennett's conduct. As the sun dipped lower toward the horizon, casting the town in a soft glow of amber and rose, Eleanor offered a final nod and turned toward the courthouse steps. Cole replaced his hat and stepped aside, allowing her to pass with the courtesy of a gentleman. Their hands did not touch, yet the space between them carried a warmth that lingered like the fading light of day. The breeze stirred gently through Silver Creek, rustling the awnings and carrying the distant call of a meadowlark across the open plains. In that fleeting moment, beneath the endless American sky, suspicion softened into understanding, and the fragile beginnings of trust took root, quiet as dusk and steadfast as the horizon. Neither spoke of what they felt, yet both understood that the path before them had begun to change, guided not by rebellion or decree, but by honor, truth, and the quiet courage of two hearts drawn together by destiny. As evening descended upon Silver Creek, the sky unfolded in sweeping shades of amber and violet, the last rays of sunlight glinting off the windows of weathered storefronts and casting long shadows across the quieting streets. Lanterns flickered to life one by one, their warm glow dancing along the boardwalk as the town settled into the gentle rhythm of dusk. A cool breeze drifted through the air, carrying the scent of sagebrush and distant rain, whispering across the open plains like a promise yet to be fulfilled. Eleanor Whitfield stood near the courthouse window, her gaze fixed upon the fading horizon where the desert met the endless sky. The events of the day lingered in her thoughts, stirring questions that defied the certainty she had always known. She recalled the steady calm in Cole Bennett's voice, the quiet dignity in his presence, and the sincerity that had softened her doubts despite the warnings echoing throughout Silver Creek. Beneath the soft glow of twilight, she found herself wondering whether truth could exist beyond the boundaries of reputation and law. Inside the sheriff's office, Thomas Whitfield sat at his desk, the magistrate's letter spread before him beneath the steady light of a brass lamp. The wax seal, stamped with federal authority, bore silent witness to words that carried consequences far beyond the borders of the small frontier town. His weathered hands rested upon the parchment as he read its contents once more, each line challenging assumptions long held and stirring a quiet unease within his steadfast heart. The letter spoke of a land dispute resolved in distant courts, of testimony that had been concealed, and of Cole Bennett's role in defending the rights of settlers whose voices had nearly been lost beneath the weight of corruption. Though the sheriff's loyalty to the law remained unshaken, he could not ignore the authority behind the seal nor the honor reflected in the man who had delivered it. Outside, the evening air shimmered with golden light as Cole Bennett stood beside his horse near the edge of town, gazing toward the horizon where the last glow of daylight faded into deepening blue. The wind tugged gently at his coat, and the soft rustle of prairie grass carried the distant call of a meadowlark settling for the night. In his hand, he held the brim of his hat, turning it slowly as though weighing the distance between past and future. He had come to Silver Creek with purpose, not to challenge its laws, but to ensure that justice found its rightful place. Yet he understood that truth alone could not erase suspicion, nor could honor silence the doubts whispered by those who feared what they did not understand. As the first stars emerged overhead, Eleanor stepped quietly onto the courthouse porch, drawn by a sense she could neither name nor resist. The lantern beside the doorway cast a soft halo of light around her, illuminating her composed features and the gentle determination reflected in her eyes. Across the street, Cole noticed her presence and inclined his head respectfully, his expression calm and unguarded. No words passed between them, yet the stillness carried a meaning deeper than speech, bridging the distance between two worlds bound by opposing loyalties. In that quiet moment, beneath the vast American sky, Eleanor sensed that the boundaries of duty were not as rigid as she had once believed, and that justice, like the desert wind, could move beyond the confines of expectation. From the doorway of his office, Sheriff Whitfield observed the silent exchange, his gaze steady and contemplative. He saw neither impropriety nor defiance, only respect and understanding. And within that realization stirred a reluctant acknowledgement that the truths of the world were often more complex than the laws meant to govern them. The lantern's glow flickered softly as night settled over Silver Creek, casting gentle light upon the dusty streets where destiny moved unseen. The town returned to its quiet slumber, unaware that beneath the starlit heavens, the fragile threads of trust, honor, and unspoken affection were weaving a story that would challenge prejudice, test loyalty, and reveal that sometimes the greatest acts of courage are born not of rebellion, but of the simple choice to believe in what is right. The night over Silver Creek unfolded like a velvet curtain, draped in silver moonlight and scattered with stars that shimmered against the boundless sky. A gentle breeze whispered through the quiet streets, stirring dust along the boardwalk and rustling the canvas awnings of shuttered storefronts. Lanterns glowed softly outside the sheriff's office and the general store, casting warm halos of light upon the empty road as the town settled into a peaceful hush. From the distant prairie came the lonely call of a coyote, carried across miles of open land, a reminder that beyond the fragile boundaries of civilization stretched a wilderness both vast and unyielding. Inside her room, Eleanor Whitfield stood beside the window, her fingers resting lightly upon the cool glass as she gazed out at the sleeping town. The events of the day lingered in her thoughts, stirring a quiet restlessness she could neither ignore nor fully understand. The magistrate's letter weighed heavily upon her mind, its presence hinting at truths yet revealed, and she found herself questioning the certainty she had once accepted without hesitation. The law had always been her compass, her father its steadfast guardian, yet the memory of Cole Bennett's calm dignity challenged the simplicity of that belief. In the silence of the night, she realized that justice, like the wind over the prairie, was not always confined by the boundaries drawn by men. Determined to seek clarity, Eleanor moved quietly through the lamplit corridors of the courthouse, her footsteps soft against the wooden floor. The door to her father's office stood slightly ajar, and within, the glow of a solitary lamp illuminated the magistrate's letter resting upon the desk. She hesitated for a moment, her conscience weighing heavily upon her heart, before stepping inside. The parchment lay open, its ink precise and unyielding, bearing the seal of federal authority. As her eyes traced its carefully written lines, understanding dawned like the first light of morning. The letter spoke not of defiance, but of honor, confirming that Cole Bennett had acted under lawful commission to expose fraudulent claims that threatened innocent settlers. His reputation as a rebel had been shaped not by wrongdoing, but by his refusal to bow to corruption. The revelation stirred a quiet resolve within her, as though the truth itself had found its voice through the steady hand of justice. Outside the courthouse, beneath the pale glow of the moon, Cole Bennett stood beside his horse near the edge of town. The night air was cool and still, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain as he gazed toward the silent streets of Silver Creek. He had intended to depart before dawn, his duty fulfilled, yet an unspoken instinct held him there, tethering him to a place that had already begun to alter the course of his journey. The wind brushed softly against his coat, and he lifted his hat briefly, as though acknowledging the quiet presence of fate. Moments later, the courthouse door opened with a gentle creak, and Eleanor stepped into the moonlight. The lantern's glow framed her silhouette in soft gold, illuminating the determination in her eyes as she approached. Their gazes met once more, and though the distance between them remained, it felt narrower than ever before. Her voice, calm yet earnest, broke the silence as she spoke of the letter and the truth it revealed. Cole listened with quiet humility, neither triumphant nor defensive, his expression reflecting gratitude not for vindication, but for understanding. In that stillness, beneath the endless American sky, suspicion gave way to trust, and the fragile bond between them deepened with the quiet certainty of shared truth. From the window of his office, Sheriff Thomas Whitfield observed the scene in silence, the lamplight casting thoughtful shadows across his weathered face. He had seen the contents of the letter, had weighed its authority against his own convictions, and though duty remained his guiding star, he could no longer deny the integrity he had witnessed. As he watched his daughter stand beneath the moonlight, speaking with the man he had once regarded with suspicion, he felt the stirrings of reluctant respect. The night deepened over Silver Creek, and the prairie wind carried with it the promise of dawn. In that quiet hour, between darkness and light, the fragile threads of truth and honor wove together, guiding two hearts toward a destiny shaped not by rumor or fear, but by courage, understanding, and the enduring pursuit of justice. The first light of dawn crept gently across Silver Creek, washing the quiet town in soft hues of gold and rose as the sun rose slowly above the eastern horizon. A thin veil of mist lingered over the open plains, glowing faintly beneath the morning sky, while the distant call of a meadowlark drifted through the crisp air like a whispered promise. Lanterns along the boardwalk flickered and dimmed as shopkeepers stirred awake, and the scent of fresh coffee and warm bread carried from the bakery, blending with the earthy fragrance of leather and sun-dried timber. The town exhaled with the calm certainty of routine, unaware that within its quiet streets, hearts and destinies were shifting in ways no law could command. Eleanor Whitfield stood near the courthouse steps, her pale blue dress catching the gentle glow of dawn as the cool breeze lifted the ribbon of her bonnet. The night's revelations lingered within her, steady as the sunrise itself, replacing uncertainty with quiet conviction. She had read the magistrate's letter, had traced each deliberate line of ink that spoke of honor rather than rebellion, and now the truth settled firmly within her heart. The world she had known all her life seemed wider, more complex, and infinitely more human. Across the street, Cole Bennett prepared to depart, tightening the strap of his saddle with practiced ease. His horse shifted patiently beneath him, breath rising in faint wisps against the chill of morning. He had fulfilled his duty, delivered the letter, and restored a truth long overshadowed by rumor. Yet as he turned toward the open prairie, his gaze lingered upon the courthouse, as though reluctant to leave behind something he had never expected to find. The golden light of dawn traced the quiet strength of his features, illuminating a man shaped not by defiance, but by integrity and purpose. Sheriff Thomas Whitfield emerged from his office, the polished star upon his chest catching the rising sun. He paused at the edge of the boardwalk, watching the lone rider with thoughtful gravity. The letter rested securely within his grasp, its federal seal a testament to truths that could not be denied. Though duty had long been his guiding compass, he now recognized the deeper weight of justice and the distinction between rumor and honor. His boots sounded softly against the wooden planks as he stepped forward, his voice calm and resolute as he addressed Cole Bennett. The town seemed to pause, its morning bustle slowing into attentive silence as law met truth beneath the boundless American sky. With measured dignity, the sheriff acknowledged the authority of the magistrate's commission and the integrity of the man who had carried it across 300 miles of unforgiving frontier. He spoke not as an adversary, but as a guardian of justice, affirming that Silver Creek would honor the truth brought before it. A murmur of quiet astonishment passed through the gathering townspeople, their skepticism softening into respect as certainty replaced suspicion. Cole inclined his head with humility, his voice steady as he expressed gratitude for the sheriff's fairness. There was no triumph in his words, only the quiet assurance of a man who had nothing to conceal. As the tension of misunderstanding lifted like morning fog beneath the rising sun, a fragile sense of peace settled over the town. Eleanor watched the exchange with a heart both hopeful and resolute, her gaze meeting Cole's across the dusty street. In that silent moment, neither spoke, yet the understanding between them shone with a clarity brighter than the dawn itself. Sheriff Whitfield followed her gaze, and in his daughter's eyes he saw not defiance, but conviction, born of truth and guided by honor. The realization stirred something deep within him, a reluctant but undeniable acceptance that justice sometimes arrived not through force, but through courage and integrity. The wind stirred gently through Silver Creek, lifting dust along the road as the prairie stretched endlessly beyond its borders. With a respectful nod, Cole placed his hat upon his head and guided his horse toward the horizon, the rhythmic sound of hooves fading softly into the distance. Yet before he departed, Eleanor stepped forward, her voice quiet but unwavering as she offered her gratitude and wished him safe travels. Their hands met briefly in a gesture of simple respect, and though the touch was fleeting, it carried a warmth that lingered long after it had passed. Beneath the vast American sky, as the sun climbed higher over the frontier, Sheriff Whitfield watched in thoughtful silence, his heart softened by understanding. In that golden morning light, Silver Creek bore witness to a truth greater than rumor, a truth that bridged the divide between law and compassion. And as the day unfolded with quiet promise, the seeds of destiny took root, guided not by rebellion or decree, but by honor, courage, and the enduring power of justice. The sun climbed steadily above Silver Creek, casting a warm, unwavering light across the town as morning deepened into a day of quiet reflection. Dust drifted lazily through the streets, stirred by the passing of wagons and the soft rhythm of horses' hooves, while the scent of pine wood smoke mingled with the sweetness of fresh bread from the bakery. Life resumed its familiar pace, yet beneath the calm surface lingered a subtle awareness that something profound had changed. Eleanor Whitfield stood beneath the shade of the courthouse porch, her gaze tracing the distant line of the horizon where the prairie met the sky. Cole Bennett's departure had left an absence she could neither deny nor dismiss, a silence that echoed softly within her heart like the fading notes of a forgotten hymn. She held herself with quiet composure, yet the warmth of their brief farewell lingered in her memory, steady as the morning light. Sheriff Thomas Whitfield remained inside his office, the magistrate's letter resting upon his desk, its official seal reflecting the sun in a soft glimmer of authority. He read the words once more, though their meaning was already etched firmly in his mind. The truth had revealed itself with clarity, and with it came a deeper understanding that justice was not always confined to the letter of the law. His weathered hands rested upon the parchment as he contemplated the shifting balance between duty and compassion, recognizing that integrity sometimes appeared in the most unexpected forms. Outside, the townspeople carried on with their daily routines, their voices mingling in quiet conversation as skepticism gradually gave way to respect. Rumors that had once painted Cole Bennett as a rebel began to dissolve like morning mist, replaced by cautious admiration for a man whose actions had spoken with honor. Children chased laughter along the boardwalk, merchants called greetings to passers-by, and the steady hum of Silver Creek returned, touched by a newfound sense of humility. Yet for Eleanor, the world felt subtly altered, as though the boundaries of her understanding had widened beneath the endless American sky. She stepped into the sunlight, her pale blue dress catching the golden glow, and allowed the breeze to brush gently against her face. In that quiet moment, she realized that her heart had awakened to a truth beyond expectation, one that could not be confined by fear or tradition. From the window of his office, Sheriff Whitfield watched his daughter with thoughtful eyes, perceiving the quiet strength in her posture and the conviction reflected in her gaze. He understood that she stood at the threshold of her own destiny, guided not by rebellion but by integrity, and though the path ahead remained uncertain, he felt the stirrings of acceptance take root within his steadfast heart. Miles beyond Silver Creek, where the open prairie stretched for more than 20 miles beneath an unbroken sky, Cole Bennett rode at an unhurried pace along a winding trail edged with sagebrush and sunlit stone. The wind carried the scent of the desert across the land, tugging gently at the brim of his hat as he guided his horse through the rolling hills. In his saddlebag lay the magistrate's letter, its purpose fulfilled, yet its significance lingering as a reminder that truth had prevailed. He paused atop a low ridge overlooking the distant valley, the town of Silver Creek barely visible upon the horizon, shimmering faintly in the afternoon light. For a moment, he allowed himself to look back, his expression calm yet contemplative, as though acknowledging the quiet bond that had taken root within his heart. The memory of Eleanor Whitfield lingered with him, gentle and unwavering, like the distant glow of a lantern against the twilight. He did not know what the future held, nor whether their paths would cross again, yet he carried with him the certainty that honor had guided him true. As the sun drifted westward, casting long shadows across the prairie, Cole tipped his hat toward the horizon before turning his horse toward the open frontier. Back in Silver Creek, Eleanor lifted her gaze toward the same endless sky, sensing that destiny, though distant, remained within reach. The wind stirred softly through the town, rustling the flags and whispering through the cottonwood trees, carrying with it the promise of journeys yet to come. And in that golden afternoon, beneath the vast American sky, law and compassion found their quiet harmony, reminding all who bore witness that true justice is not forged by power alone, but by courage, integrity, and the enduring grace of the human heart. The days that followed drifted across Silver Creek like a slow-moving tide of sunlight and dust, each sunrise painting the town in soft gold, while each sunset wrapped it in amber and shadow. Life returned to its steady rhythm. Yet beneath the quiet hum of wagon wheels and the distant ring of the blacksmith's hammer lingered a subtle awareness that something within the town had changed forever. The magistrate's letter had done more than clear a name. It had awakened a deeper understanding of justice, one that no longer rested solely upon suspicion or rumor. Merchants spoke with newfound respect, and the whispers that once trailed behind Cole Bennett dissolved like morning mist beneath the rising sun. Sheriff Thomas Whitfield carried the letter with solemn care, its seal now preserved within the courthouse records, a testament to truth and fairness. Though his duty remained unwavering, his perspective had softened, tempered by the realization that integrity could wear unexpected faces. He moved through the streets with the same steady authority, yet those who knew him best noticed a quiet thoughtfulness in his gaze, as though he weighed each judgment with renewed humility. Eleanor Whitfield walked beside him that afternoon, her pale blue dress stirring gently in the prairie breeze as they crossed the boardwalk beneath the clear American sky. She sensed the unspoken understanding between them, a fragile harmony born not of defiance, but of truth. Her father's voice, when he spoke, carried neither reproach nor warning, only the calm reassurance of a man who trusted her wisdom. In that moment, she knew that his silence was not resistance, but acceptance. Beyond the town limits, more than 15 miles across the sunlit prairie, Cole Bennett guided his horse along a winding trail edged with sagebrush and weathered stone. The vast horizon stretched endlessly before him, painted in shades of gold and blue, while the wind carried the scent of open earth and distant rain. He rode with unhurried resolve, the rhythmic sound of hooves echoing across the land like a quiet promise. Yet Silver Creek lingered in his thoughts, its dusty streets and lantern-lit nights etched into memory alongside the image of Eleanor Whitfield standing beneath the courthouse porch. He paused atop a gentle rise overlooking a valley bathed in afternoon light, the town barely visible more than 20 miles behind him. From his saddlebag, he withdrew a small leather-bound journal, its worn pages filled with careful script. With steady hands, he penned a brief message, expressing gratitude for understanding and respect for the justice upheld in Silver Creek. He sealed the note and entrusted it to a passing rider bound for town, a gesture simple yet sincere, before turning once more toward the open frontier. 2 days later, beneath the warm glow of a late afternoon sun, Eleanor received the letter. She stood beside the courthouse window as the breeze lifted the edge of the parchment, her eyes tracing each word with quiet emotion. There was no flourish in his writing, only honesty and grace, yet its simplicity spoke with profound clarity. As she folded the letter against her heart, a gentle smile touched her lips, and she stepped onto the porch, gazing toward the endless horizon where earth and sky embraced. Sheriff Whitfield watched her from the doorway, his expression thoughtful yet serene. He recognized the light in his daughter's eyes, the quiet certainty that could not be denied, and in that moment he understood that justice was not diminished by compassion, but strengthened by it. He placed a reassuring hand upon her shoulder, offering silent approval beneath the golden light of the setting sun. As evening descended upon Silver Creek, the sky blossomed in shades of rose and violet, and lanterns flickered to life along the boardwalk. The prairie wind whispered through the cottonwood trees, carrying with it the promise of distant journeys and unforeseen reunions. Somewhere beyond the horizon, Cole Bennett rode beneath the same sky, guided by honor and memory, while Eleanor Whitfield stood beneath the courthouse lamp, her heart anchored by truth and hope. In the quiet glow of twilight, beneath the vast American sky, destiny moved with gentle certainty, weaving together two lives once separated by law and rumor, and proving that when justice is tempered by understanding, it becomes a force capable of uniting even the most distant of hearts. The sun rose gently over Silver Creek on a quiet spring morning, spilling liquid gold across the rolling prairie and awakening the town with a promise of renewal. A soft breeze stirred the cottonwood trees along the riverbank, their leaves whispering beneath a sky so wide and clear it seemed to stretch into eternity. Dust shimmered in the early light as merchants opened their doors and townsfolk exchanged warm greetings along the weathered boardwalk. The world moved with the steady rhythm of hope, as though the frontier itself had exhaled after a long and restless night. Eleanor Whitfield stood beneath the courthouse porch, her pale blue dress catching the glow of dawn as she gazed toward the horizon. Months had passed since the magistrate's letter arrived, yet its truth had reshaped Silver Creek in quiet, enduring ways. Justice had been restored, suspicion had given way to understanding, and the town now bore witness to a deeper harmony between law and compassion. Beside her, Sheriff Thomas Whitfield rested a steady hand upon the polished rail, his silver star gleaming in the morning sun. Though the lines upon his face spoke of years devoted to duty, his eyes carried a newfound gentleness, born from the realization that fairness required not only strength, but wisdom. As the breeze lifted the edge of Eleanor's bonnet, the distant rhythm of approaching hooves echoed across the prairie, soft at first, then unmistakable. She felt her breath catch, her heart stirred by a quiet certainty that needed no explanation. A solitary figure emerged along the dusty road, framed by the rising sun, his silhouette steady against the endless horizon. Cole Bennett rode into view with unhurried grace, his posture calm, his presence guided not by defiance but by purpose. The townspeople paused in their morning routines, their gazes following him with curiosity softened by respect. No whispers of suspicion lingered now, only the recognition of a man whose honor had stood firm against doubt. Cole reined in his horse at the edge of the courthouse steps, removing his hat as he inclined his head with quiet respect. The sunlight caught the brim, illuminating features shaped by endurance and integrity. Sheriff Whitfield stepped forward, his boots sounding gently upon the wooden planks, and extended his hand in greeting. The gesture was simple, yet it carried the weight of acceptance, a silent acknowledgement that truth had bridged the divide between them. Cole accepted the handshake with humility, his voice steady as he spoke of his return to settle unfinished matters and to thank the town that had honored justice. Eleanor watched the exchange, her heart illuminated by a warmth that surpassed words. When her gaze met Cole's, the world seemed to soften into stillness, the distant hum of Silver Creek fading beneath the boundless sky. He approached with measured steps, his expression sincere, and for a moment neither spoke. Their silence carried the depth of understanding forged through truth and trust, stronger than rumor and gentler than dawn. "Miss Whitfield," he said quietly, his voice as calm as the prairie wind, "I wish to see Silver Creek once more." Eleanor's smile was soft and unwavering as she inclined her head. "And Silver Creek is better for your return, Mr. Bennett." The words were simple, yet they resonated with the clarity of the morning light. Sheriff Whitfield regarded them both, the faintest trace of a smile touching his weathered features. He saw not rebellion nor defiance, but honor, compassion, and the quiet strength of two souls guided by integrity. With a respectful nod, he stepped aside, offering them the silent blessing of a father who had learned that justice and understanding were not adversaries, but companions. The prairie wind stirred gently through the town, lifting dust along the sunlit road as the American flag unfurled against the endless sky. Cole and Eleanor stood side by side beneath the golden light, their hands meeting in a gesture of simple promise, neither hurried nor uncertain. Around them, Silver Creek breathed with renewed peace, its streets bathed in the glow of morning, its people bearing witness to a truth greater than rumor or fear. As the sun climbed higher, illuminating the frontier with radiant clarity, the vast horizon stretched before them, filled with possibility. And in that quiet moment, beneath the boundless American sky, It became clear that justice did not always arrive with thunder or steel. Sometimes, it came softly, carried on the wind, guided by courage, compassion, and the enduring grace of the human heart.